Our next speaker is Professor Akhilendra Gupta, who will be talking to us about air pollutants and human respiratory health.
Thank you, Chair. Since already I have delivered a seminar half an hour, I'm just changing the flavor of this particular talk to not bring out some of the common points on which we can probably work together. So, first is converting observations to research. And I have given this particular example this morning that the doctor came to me and said that he was cleaning the throat swab or taking a throat swab of a patient, and suddenly an asthma attack respirated. When I asked him the reason for the trauma, he says itching of the mucous lining. So I said such an itching can easily be caused by shear stresses produced during intense coughing. Then came the research that we modeled it and identified that why should the patient, if he is undergoing some tough bout of cough, should take a prophylactic dose of the inhaler in order to prevent maybe 4 curative doses. So many such observations we do have, which can be converted together through modeling and simulations to useful problems. Then the industrial pollution and health effects. All across the world, there are laws where public can make agitation against a particular industry. They have to register or file a complaint. Now in India also, due to the coming up of National Green Tribunal, now we get lots of such studies. But when I started off in 1996, this study, there was no such precedence. So we made a lot of protocols for linking health of the people to industrial pollution. That included large number of people being surveyed for questionnaire, for morbidities, and then how to monitor, where to monitor the exposure, then how to create causal linkages through appropriate statistics being used. What is the importance of right kind of controls? And then the established medical parameters were analyzed in micro details to go into the problem, which resulted into much better regression coefficients obtained. Say, for example, peak expiratory flow rate. We converted that into 4 different classes of severe, moderate, and mild symptoms, which corroborated very well with the morbidities that were found during the questionnaire survey. And in a similar way, this PEFR variability that we talked about during the previous presentation was that housewives, after preparing the meals, before and after preparation of the meals, were found to have around 20% drop in peak expiratory flow rate, but only among those who had complained of wheezing in their questionnaire survey. So PGI Chandigarh people tried to give a explanation of it, physiological explanation. So they monitored carboxyhemoglobin in the blood, but it was not proving true. So I took the clue that in a kitchen where you have LPG working at a good efficiency, it's producing a lot of nitrogen oxides and not CO. So what is formed in the blood is methemoglobin and not carboxyhemoglobin. So we modeled this thing through a series of mathematical equations, and we validated the model through measurements of carboxyhemoglobin as well as SpO2, because whether it's carboxyhemoglobin or hemoglobin that is formed will ultimately result into the reduction in SpO2. Now, the same thing I extended during the COVID outbreak, and I wrote a note on 12th of April 2020, when the first wave had not entered India, that where are Americans going wrong in finding out the COVID manifestations. And I applied those mass transfer equations to indicate that how is possibly, so that was an engineer's view of a medical problem. There was an example of Spanish flu in the past. There was an example of London smog in which more than 5,500 people lost their lives. And through a post-simulation, it was found that people didn't die of the sulfur dioxide or nitrogen oxide toxicity, but they rather died of lowering of the pH of inhaled air, resulting in oozing out of the fluids and choking the lungs. Now, this is a reverse situation here. I wrote that during respiratory compromised conditions, the exhalation of NOx would be typically 4 to 5 times higher. That was supported in medical papers. If this contact reduces the pH by 0.15, which is not unlikely, then the clotting occurs, cytokine storm starts. So how do we do as a next step? I'd written that you should go for nebulization using corticosteroids, but not with sodium carbonate, not with sodium chloride as a medium, but sodium bicarb, because it will have the effect of neutralizing the pH. This was adopted after 45 days in protocols when autopsies were carried out in Italy. The next level I'd gone was up to a certain level, oxygen will help because this hypoxia is caused due to the manifestations. But beyond a certain limit, methemoglobin levels will increase to such an extent that it's a methemoglobin cycle, and what Americans are calling as carboxymoglobin cycle does not exist because there is no body thermodynamics that can result into exhalation of CO. So all these mathematics can easily be applied to any of the manifestations, and it's an onus on the engineers to come out with some prognosis which can probably be validated by the doctors later. And that is what I've been doing for years together. And we have tried to develop some very simple devices. When we monitored the indoor air in the rural kitchens, I was amazed to see the poor lady cooking at in a sweating condition at a corner of the room, gets exposed to 5,000 microgram per cubic meter of nitrogen oxide as against the guideline value of 200. Even up to 6,000 ppm of carbon monoxide against the standards of 10 ppm. And on top of that, temperatures ranging from 37 degrees to 57 degrees during preparation of a meal. Whereas the law says 50 plus, close down the industries. So why they are suffering, how to relieve them of their suffering, this simple device was made, which from a very small, which will take heat from the stove, and the exhaust fan will be on all the time when the chula is on, because nitrogen oxide is produced due to the combustion, and that has to be ventilated out. Even if you don't smell NOx and you don't see fine particles, it is present in LPG lit stoves very extensively. So the message is you should always put the exhaust fan on all the time, and your electric chimney can only remove typically few micron plus particles. What is happening to the fine particles along with NOx due to their absorptive tendencies? So these we have brought out and have to be taken to the next level, maybe with the help of maybe Loughborough University or any other. Then the occupational exposures to various workplaces. We have worked on marble sculptors and many industries, copper industry in Bhiwadi and then Kamani industries where acid fumes were coming. And the first of such industries I worked upon was in 1987. And I gave them a hood for removing the acid mist. How did I sensitize them? I went to the manager's office, monitored the values. I monitored the site of the pickling unit. So I told the manager that you are exposed to 1/5 of the pollution level as compared to that of workers. So the workers are dying in 2-3 years, maybe you take 10 years. Immediately took all the measures. So you have to ultimately sensitize people about such things. And a few lines about these two ongoing projects. Poland, in Loughborough also, I was feeling some shortness of breath. This is a time where pollen comes up. In my institute, every March and September, the antihistaminics consumption is 5 times higher. So as an engineer, it's the onus on us to identify the first signs of pollen coming into the air. Like this year, I spotted the first Malaviya pollen in March end. February end. Earlier, it used to be spotted in the second week of March. And coincidentally, after a week's time, there was a heavy downpour. So the pollen allergy existed for only 1 week. Otherwise, it takes a heavy toll. And that is how, again, maybe a remote sensing technique can have a signature to be indicated at an early stage, maybe Lipika can help out. And we are trying to monitor pollen. We've got 2 similar equipment from a similar company of US. We put them together and there's no correlation in the data. So I was talking to Diganta that we should develop low-cost pollen counters by using our own aerodynamics concepts and then chemical markers to be sensed from a simple optical sensor. But extend this to ultimately remote sensing because those data are very handy, available anywhere in the world. So that is one thing. Second is silicosis. This is a notifiable disease. Means if you are diagnosed with silicosis, the onus is on the government to pay for your treatment, and it's an irreversible system. Slowly it turns into ILD. So all your lungs are choked, and deaths take place in a matter of maybe a couple of years to maybe 10 years, depending on the location at which the worker is placed. So we are trying to develop some markers. Like in the X-rays, we are using some AI techniques to identify if we could put up some markers of silica, then which form of silica, crystalline or amorphous. And then we are trying to develop a unit to be attached to the X-ray machine, so that along with the X-ray, it will indicate whether it's a possible case of silicosis. So it will help us quantify in a better way. And how things are changing. 8 years back, few tens of patients only were notified. But the human rights head was highly motivated. He talked to us, and now 3.3 million patients have been recorded. So ultimately, all I want to say is that preventive health is of primary importance. As I had indicated with more details about fluorosis reversal and nitrate pathophysiologies for water that we have developed, have resulted into sharp decline in the infant mortality, a sharp decline in the health costs because of the prevention being talked about and practiced. So as engineers, I think we are good in analysis and we should do something. And regarding olfactory measures, my daughter was in US doing her PhD during these COVID times. She developed a scale of 7-8 perfumes to find out how much olfactory loss has taken place due to COVID, which is a very common feature. And then, interestingly, how is that sense recovered back would correlate with the severity of symptoms suffered. That was, so this is how, I mean, scientists have to go ahead. Everyone cannot be a doctor like you, sir. And so many collaborations I seek in both pollen monitoring instrument, pollen catching from the remote sensing data, and then for silicosis, as I said. So this is what I expect, but finally to the policy, ultimately. I was telling you in the previous seminar that we take pride in telling that 33 of the 40 most polluted cities of the world are in India. I don't know how can we be proud about it, but if you ask CPCB, Central Pollution Control people, they would, I mean, just tell it. So during one of the NGT-based workshops, I was to deliver a keynote, and I was telling them about something which they didn't like. Then I said, okay, I'll get the answers from you. How does this happen due to the ignorance? You have to establish or install a pollution monitoring equipment. As per the rules, it should be at least 30 meters away from the nearest source and 10 meters up. They're placing it on the roadside because it's easy to get an electric connection. Now, that value may be 2 or 3 times higher than what would reach the ambient air quality station. And you're finding out the index by all the available indices coming from the Western literature. You have missed out the point that you have installed the monitoring station in the wrong place. So you have to be very careful, and then you can go back and change your air quality index. So for example, in 1995, we had lots of data of respiratory problems through a study by Dr. Kamath, who tracked 47,000 people for almost 20 years, perhaps the largest database on respiratory problems in Mumbai. And then I suggested that, assuming a particular level of morbidity to be normal, we should have stricter standards for SO2, and we can slightly relax the standards of NOx. So this is a back calculation. Many times, like methanol blends were to be introduced. I indicated through my mathematics that even if 15% of the fleet gets converted to methanol blends instead of petrol alone or gasoline, as we call it, it will not be the CO which will be the critical pollutant, but it will be formaldehyde. And this is another, since the previous presentation was on olfactory senses, till 50s, trained sniffers, human sniffers were used to identify traces of formalin present in the indoor air. So human sensory organs are very, very strong. So anything can be connected to anything else, but SAPI is another index which indicates the general environmental health of an industrial zone. Purpose, if it is exceeding certain values, you should be able to take up some measures in those industries to bring it to within limits. When I saw the way index was calculated, I was appalled. And then I gave them 13 different calculations of SAPI with the same data. And I told them that where have you gone wrong with choice of primary and secondary parameters. Similarly, AQI in India incorporates PM10. Now 2.5 is a standard parameter, PM1 is a standard parameter for linking to health. If you put 10 micron particles, which hardly can produce some upper respiratory itching, it is changing the whole value in a place like mine, where we have non-cohesive soil coming in suspension with sandstorm. A lot of people get admitted. AQI of Jaipur, despite very low pollution levels, is indicated to be higher than that of Mumbai or Delhi. Yeah. So that is it. And thank you so much for giving me time, because if we do not take these things into account, forget about smoking, when breathing is a health hazard. And finally, let's prevent this kind of a breathing practices in this world. Thank you so much.